Hello and welcome to Global Business Insights, where we take a deeper look at the headlines from a business perspective. In Nigeria, economic growth momentum picked up as gross domestic product expanded an annual 3.2% in the 3 months through June, compared with 2.98% in the previous quarter. The services sector lifted GDP, growing 3.79%, also contributing 58% to aggregate gross domestic product. We will discuss the details from the report. Also, a Nigerian judge will hear a money laundering case against Binance, that's the crypto exchange giant, and two of its executives next week. That is more than a month earlier than planned, after defense lawyers asked for the date change. Germany's IFO survey showed that business sentiment fell in August, indicating a still struggling economy. The IFO Business Climate Index fell to 86.6 points in August from 87.0 points the previous month. Telegram has questioned the grounds for France's detention of Chief Executive Officer Pavel Durov, the co-founder who was taken into custody at a Paris airport over the weekend. New orders for manufactured durable goods in the US spiked up by $26.1 billion or 9.9% to $289.6 billion in July, also the most in 4 years. This came after the 6.9% contraction, revised from 6.6% contraction, recorded in June, and also better than market expectations. On earnings this week, Nvidia will post results on Wednesday. It will need a blockbuster quarter and upbeat guidance to justify valuations for tech stocks that are looking somewhat pricey again, and the need to show that the artificial intelligence hype is real. Nvidia is trading at 47 times forward earnings estimates. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said today that Canada will impose a 100% tariff on the import of Chinese electric vehicles. Ottawa will also impose a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminium from China. China's Ministry of Commerce says it strongly opposes the US decision to add multiple Chinese entities to its export control list over Russia-related issues. The United States on Friday had added 105 Russian and Chinese firms to a trade restriction list over alleged support of the Russian military. At the ended Central Bank Jackson Hole Symposium, Jerome Powell gave the strongest signal on an imminent cut of rates next month. We will replay our chat on the takeaways of this symposium. Pavel Durov was detained on suspicion of not taking steps to prevent very serious criminal use, which includes organized crime, including the spread of child sexual abuse material, drug trafficking, fraud, cyberbullying, and the promotion of terrorism on his platform, which has about 800 million users. Telegram issued a statement saying it is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform. We still need to get more details, but on the face of it, something someone said or did was seriously wrong, and Telegram may have to answer for it. Some analysts also suspect that there could also be an anti-free speech trend, as populist dissatisfaction is latching on to using social media to voice frustrations, and social media emerges as a bolder platform to bypass the more cautious traditional press. But we may still have to wait for more details to emerge on the charges and the case against Telegram. Nigeria's gross domestic product in Q2 2024 grew by 3.19%, higher than the 2.51% recorded in the second quarter of 2023, and also higher than the first quarter of 2024 growth of 2.98%. Improved performance was helped mainly by the services sector, which recorded a growth of 3.79%, contributing 58.76% of the aggregate GDP. The details still, however, show a mixed picture. Oil production in the second quarter of 2024 recorded production of 1.41 million barrels per day, up from 1.22 million barrels per day recorded in the same quarter of 2023, but lower than the first quarter of 2024 production volume of 1.57 million barrels per day. The executive president of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation Upstream Division, Mr. Eyesan, projects that daily output will rise to about 2 million barrels per day by the end of this year. The agricultural sector in the second quarter of 2024 grew by 1.41%. That's year on year, a decrease of 0.09 points from the corresponding period of 2023, and an increase of 1.22 percentage points from the preceding quarter. Real growth in the manufacturing sector, that was the worst performer. That's in Q2 of 2024 was 1.28%, lower than the same quarter of 2023 by 0.92%, and also lower than the preceding quarter by 0.22 percentage points. The federal budget targets a 3.7% economic growth in 2024 and proposes to take Nigeria's economy to the $1 trillion level within the next 8 years. Investors are positioning more confidently for a Fed rate cut in the US at its next September FOMC meeting. Last Friday, Powell made it clear that the time has come for necessary adjustments. Also in the US, Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker reiterated rate cuts should be methodical, agreeing that it's time to start the process. Pier Paolo Benigno of the University of Bern and Brown University Professor Gautier Getson both concluded that cooling in the labor market is approaching an inflection point where additional slowing could bring a much larger increase in the U.S. unemployment rate. The risk of waiting too long and hurting the U.S. economy is therefore elevated. For the Bank of England, which cut its benchmark rate in August, Governor Andrew Bailey said that while it's too early to declare victory over inflation, the risks of persistent price pressures appear to be receding. Still very guarded. For the ECB, which lowered rates in June, many members, including Finland's Olli Rehn, Latvia's Martin Kazaks, Croatia's Boris Vucic, said they would support another reduction in interest rates next month. But ECB chief economist Philip Lane also said the return to 2% inflation is not yet secure. Brazil Central Bank Chief Roberto Campos Neto said managing monetary policy transmission will become increasingly difficult without addressing fiscal issues, citing the growing burden of public debt driven by expanded government spending. And the IMF chief economist Pierre-Olivier Gorincha said at the annual economic symposium that the Japanese central bank can continue to raise rates gradually at a data-dependent pace. The Fed BOJ policy divergence acts as a headwind to the US dollar yen exchange rate amid escalating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Implications for Africa and emerging economies include lower cost of external borrowings, and easing is positive also for capital flow to Africa, where rates in many countries like Nigeria are still quite high. But larger public debt and fiscal excess will sabotage central bank efforts to tame prices. In summary, all seem to agree it's too early to declare victory over inflation, but there is enough progress to ease the tightening. The big lesson: gauging a path to inflation can be difficult, and the propensity to be blindsided by more complex geoeconomic factors is much higher than in the past, in a much more connected world. For investors, it still means the next few months are likely to be volatile, and it will be smart to ensure a diversified portfolio to help offset any near-term fluctuations with enough in safe haven assets. For the Nigerian Central Bank, there are lessons. First, the importance of data to guide the balancing act, especially data on jobs and the economy, and diagnostics on factors driving inflation. Also important is the need for independence from the executive branch and the politics, and understanding the role the alignment with the fiscal side plays in monetary policy transmission and effectiveness. How will the elections in the US impact the relationship between US and China? Both parties are barking loudly against China. What matters is the bite. And while we see both parties acting against Chinese interests in terms of trade, investment restrictions, and tariffs, a Harris government will use more subtle barriers to hold China back from penetration in US markets, while a Trump government will be bolder with raising tariffs, not just on China, but also against Europe. After COVID hit in 2020, the United States suddenly understood vulnerabilities it had ignored. The supply chain for everything from pharmacological inputs to rare earth minerals depended on China, and that Beijing had taken the lead in industries that the United States once dominated, such as the production of batteries. Also, access to high-end semiconductors and industry created by American giants such as Intel turned out to depend on the security of Taiwan, where 90% of advanced chip making takes place. Since then, we've seen efforts to address these vulnerabilities, which took time to develop and would not be corrected overnight. Slowing China down and discouraging the extension of its dominance in the global tech supply chain is a top priority agenda. And of course, we know there are several excuses such as security concerns or trading with Russia and Iran that will be mentioned. According to Condoleezza Rice, U.S. former Secretary of State and security advisor, in a recent article, she says the United States is a different country now, exhausted by 8 decades of international leadership, some of it successful and appreciated, some of it dismissed as failure. She adds that the United States' global involvement will not look exactly as it has for the last 80 years, and Washington is more likely to choose its engagements more carefully, and allies will have to bear more of the cost of defending themselves than they are used to. Trade agreements will also be less ambitious and global, but more regional and selective. She also writes of the need to focus on giving more meaningful education, skills, and job training interventions instead of populist rhetoric to protect jobs. China reacted yesterday to the US decision to add multiple Chinese entities to its export control list over Russia-related issues, but will be fashioning its own strategy as it observes how the US approach to the external front will be reframed after the elections. A world with growing authoritarian communism, despots, and misbehaving dictators still needs America, and America still needs the world. Isolationism is never the answer, but we'll see emerging a new cooperation framework. Some are calling it a different reglobalization. European stocks were mixed as traders digested rising tensions in the Middle East, the Dow up and on pace to close at a record high. Also, as the S&P 500 inched up in choppy trading, all this as markets firmed up bets on an imminent rate cut by the Federal Reserve. Energy stocks were also boosted after crude oil prices jumped. Oil prices remained elevated as Middle East tensions threaten a wider conflict, spiking over 5% today to over $80 per barrel for Brent crude. Libya also said it would shut down oil production and exports amid a domestic dispute between the eastern and western factions in the country. In the near term, Brent is expected to trade in the $75 to $85 per barrel range due to lower prospects of a truce in Gaza and an expected Iranian retaliation against Israel. Well, that's it from me on Global Business Insights. This is Bode Oshosami. Please send your comments. Again, thank you so very much for watching. Bye-bye.